This is how to repair a tear using machine darning and fusible bonding web patches. First, find a fabric that is similar in weight, structure, and fiber content to the garment that needs to be repaired. Determine the shape and size of the patch. Make sure it is at least a ½ inch or about a centimeter larger on all sides of the patch. In this case, I'm going to be making a patch that is 2 inches by 11 inches. Once you've marked out your patch, you can cut it out, and then you're going to need to source something called Fusible Bonding Web or Stitch Witchery. This is spun glue that is sticky or fusible on both sides, so it can melt onto 2 surfaces at once, unlike fusible interfacing. You're also going to need to make sure that there's protection between where the patch is, where the hole is, and whatever surface you're working on. In this circumstance, I'm going to be using a pressing ham to protect the fabric underneath, and I'm also going to put a press cloth in between the layers so that if my fusible bond webbing melts, it does not melt onto my ironing table or onto the pants. While this step can happen a little bit later, I like to make sure that my patch is the correct size. So go ahead and lay your patch on the garment, and if you need to, you can trim it down, or if it's not large enough, you can go back in and make a larger patch. Now I'm going to lay out the stitch witchery, which can come in rolls like this or in yardage. I prefer the yardage, but this is what I had on hand, so I'm going to use it up. And you are going to cut the lengths that you need of the stitch witchery. Now, either at a serger or using a zigzag stitch, you're going to create your own fusible patch by connecting the stitch witchery or the fusible bonding web to the fabric that you're using for a patch. Just make sure that all of the outside edges are connected, and you can again do this many different ways, but stitching it together is a really fast way to do it. Next, I'm going to be stitching this long edge of the last piece of fusible bonding web to the edge, and then I will have created a patch. This is great because you can make a patch that's any shape or size, and because it has the stitch witchery or the fusible bonding web, it makes it really easy to hold in place. Sometimes if you pin things together, you can get little tucks and creases, and so these patches are ace. Now you're going to carefully fuse the patch onto the hole. Note that you can either spread the opening of the hole open so that there's a little bit more wiggle room for the wear, or you can close it shut. You can also cut those strands that I had in the beginning before this step or after this step, or you can leave them for more of a distressed look. After you have adhered the inside of the fabric, you can do the same on the outside to make sure that the patch is really fused on. Use a press cloth so that that stitch witchery does not come onto your iron, and it will melt off eventually onto the fabric or in the washing machine, and so this will just hold things in place temporarily. Now you can decide whether you want to keep all of those stranglers out or clip them off. Next, you're going to position your patch underneath the sewing machine, and sometimes this takes a little bit of finagling. I've got a color that matches the denim on the outside of the jeans. If you have a really stretchy jean, you can try out using a ballpoint needle, or you can use a universal needle. Just test out and see which one is best. And then you're just going to stitch around the edge of the patch to secure the patch in place. I usually do this about an 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch away from the edge of the serging or the zigzag if you used a zigzag. And this will just make sure that the patch doesn't move around. And if you use a light color, usually you can't really see it. Alternatively, you can use a contrasting color if you would like. And as you're going around the edges, make sure that you keep the machine needle in the fabric and down into the machine, just so that you don't have a jog in your stitch. And then once you get to the end of your patch, you're going to make sure that you secure it with a back stitch. At the end of your stitch, make sure that you clip your threads nice and close to the edge of the fabric. Any loose threads that you leave usually like to be tugged on, and if someone tugs on a thread, it might come undone. This is what the outside will look once the stitch is on, and now you can get ready to adjust your machine to your darning stitch. So you may or may not have this on my machine. It's number 22, and basically all this does is it sets it so that the machine is going forward and backwards, and the machine position of the needle moves from the left to the right on its own. If you don't have this setting on your machine, that's no big deal. You're just going to continue to go forward and then use the back stitch lever or button and slightly move from left to right or right to left, depending on what works best for you, over the stitch. This is called machine darning, and we're going to be doing this first vertically, and then we'll go back in and do this horizontally. So you can see this sped up. It takes a little bit of time, but it will reinforce the patch, and it's a really great way to make sure that the patch stays in place. You'll also want to make sure that your needle isn't too large. If the hole of the needle is too large, you can actually damage the fabric. Now I'm going to come back in and do the same thing, but I'm going to go back over this just like you would a woven fabric, and I will be repairing it and darning it from the front to the back. Once you get to the end of your patch, you can clip the threads and remove your jeans from the machine or your pants from the machine and just kind of inspect the front and the back. Now's the time that you can clean up any loose threads as well as any yarns remaining from the tear. And I really like the way that machine darning looks. I think that it's interesting, it's cool, it's kind of rugged. And you can really get creative with this if you'd like, but you can also keep it simple. Usually I like to add a little bit of space opening up where the tear was, because if it was torn there, that might mean that there needs to be a little bit more space in that spot for the client. And then the last step is to give the pants a really good press so that they aren't buckling. And you should be good to go. I hope this helps you with any of your tears.